Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. So today has been absolutely crazy. I mean, earlier today there was a leaked image and immediately, apparently, it was confirmed after I uploaded my video and then had the episode. One of the first comments be like, this just got confirmed. And I'm like, what? Wizards? Okay, so they're apparently on top of this, and yeah, they are like, oh, okay, they got leaked. All right, we'll put up the actual ones. Let's jump into those confirmed cards and some other unexpected spoilers, too. Let's jump into it. So, first up, Sephiroth Planet's Heir and Cloud Planet's Champion. I was slightly wrong on Sephiroth, a little bit, just very, very slightly off. I had to kind of, like, part of the card was cut off in the leak. I put, I think, Planet's Herald. It's Heir instead of Herald, and also it is 4 blue-black versus 3 blue-black, so 1 mana more, but I did get the 4/4 right. I got that right, and also I missed that it's a soldier, apparently, so everything else, though, completely correct on these. If you want to see my takes on these cards, it's the exact same take, because, yeah, there's basically nothing changed. Sephiroth costing 1 more and having a slightly different name and being a soldier changes nothing about my take, so make sure you check that episode out. But remember that you can just ignore, like, the whole, like, take it with a grain of salt because it's a leak. It's not a leak. It's confirmed now. Okay, here we go. That being said, some massive actual cards outside of these. Jumbo Cactuar. I can't believe this is real. A 1/7 plant for 7 mana in green. 10,000 needles. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets plus 9,999 plus 0 until end of turn. Okay, so, yeah, this is a one-shot KO on anyone, essentially, unless you have literally infinite life or, 10,001 life. So if you've got that friend over there that has, like, the life gain strategy, have fun just throwing this down the table and be like, oh, how much you at? Oh, you're at 2,000. That's really impressive. That's cool, all right. Rogue's Passage, Jumbo Cactuar, pass the turn. Yeah, this can definitely be a one-shot KO on anyone, obviously, in kind of power matters synergies. It is an insane kind of card, like my Mr. Orfeo Hotline Fling deck. I would love to put this in there, but unfortunately, this is definitely not going to be budget-friendly. I cannot imagine that it's going to be budget-friendly. If it is, thank goodness I will throw that in that deck right away, because Mr. Orfeo says, let's double that now as well. That being said, obviously, any kind of a Fling effect plus this is a one-shot KO. Technically not a combo, but I mean, technically it is a combo, really, because I think you can assume that someone's life total is 10,000 or less. So yeah, any kind of a fling effect, any kind of effect that's like, hey, power this, hit, yes, done. That being said, yeah, this just in any kind of like stompy deck, absolutely would love it. Any of those cards that play like greatest power, I mean, like, ironically, again, the cards like, hey, Rishkar's Expertise, garbage with this card, because you'll just lose, because you would draw out your deck. But basically, those ones are like, oh gosh, what's the one where it's like you go get basic lands based off of the power? Yeah, use that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I get every single basic in my deck, and then some. So there you go. Yeah, power matters, stompy plant tribal, I guess, but obviously just, hey, big power decks. Next up, we've got Stiltzkin, Moogle, Merchant, a 1/2 Moogle with lifelink for a single white mana. This is a legendary creature, so it can be your commander. Thank goodness that Jumbo Cactuar can't be your commander. Pay 2, tap, target opponent gains control of another target permanent you control. If they do, you draw a card. Very intentionally put into mono white, most definitely, versus it being a 5-color commander, which would have been hilarious if it was a 5-color commander, because yeah, Bad Gifts Tribal would be a very fun thing for you. I mean, it's still a commander where it's going to be, yeah, you can go, like, political control. You can go with, I mean, that's the direction I would take it, because it's probably the most nice. Political control, you could go Group Hug, if you really want to just go straight up Group Hug. But yeah, you could definitely do Bad Gifts. You are limited to your Bad Gifts, because a lot of the Bad Gifts are outside of Mono White, I would say. There are still certain ones out there, like Steel Golem or whatever, like, some things that, like, make opponents not be able to play creatures until they get rid of it, essentially. So yeah, getting, some permanents out there that you actually don't want and then giving it away to an opponent to kind of hamper them, that is definitely a strategy. And yeah, I mean, that's nice. It is interesting. Rules lawyers out there, help me out, because it says like target opponent against roll, not target permanent you control. If they do, you draw a card. Why is there if they do? I mean, they have to gain control of it, right? So I assume. Maybe if something interrupts it, I have no idea. Basically, yeah, untap effects could be great for this as well, obviously, because you can do this more than one time in a turn if you need to. Some card draw benefits, maybe some, like, Alhemret's Archive, like, doubling that up kind of thing. yeah, it could be good just in a bad gifts deck itself, but of course, as a commander, definitely a bad gifts / political control type commander itself. Moving on, we've got Cecil Dark Knight, a 2/3 human knight with death touch for a single black mana. 2/3 for a single black mana. Nice. Whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. Okay, that's why we have, the 1 mana for 2/3. Then if your starting life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, untap and transform it. I mean, I'm sure you want that to actually happen, though, anyways. So we've got Cecil Redeemed Paladin, a 4/4 lifelink. When it attacks other 10 creatures, gain indestructible till end of turn. Okay, so this is an interesting one because, again, it definitely can be your commander. It's a very interesting commander where, again, you're kind of like actively working against yourself to start off with. It is an aggressive low-to-the-ground commander, though. And this commander is, I believe, an Orzhov, right? Because front side black, backside white. So, yeah, it's an Orzhov commander. So you definitely have, like, double strike type effects. You can, like, hit really hard quite quickly with this. And you can flip it really quickly as well. I mean, again, like, obviously you're losing life based on when you're hitting with the commander on the front side, but essentially, if you throw out any of the, like, Wall of Blood type cards, any of those, like, life-setting cards that you can just keep paying, like Mischievous Poltergeist, like, pay 1 mana, regenerate. Cool, all right, I'll do that 20 times. I'm down to 20. Awesome, I flip my commander immediately. Like, is the backside, like, big enough to build around? Like, having, like, a life linker that can give your other creatures indestructible? I mean, for most commander decks, probably not. It's probably more of a playing piece, like, in certain strategies, I guess. But, like, it is low to the ground. It's aggressive, and yeah, it could definitely be a very interesting deck build. It doesn't protect itself, but of course, there's other ways to protect it too. Definitely getting through quite quickly with a lot of damage. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be an interesting build. I think it's gonna be a very interesting build for sure. Absolutely. So, yeah, very cool. Next up, Sazh Chocobo, a 0/1 bird for a single green mana. Landfall whenever a land you control enters, put a counter on this creature. I mean, counters decks, maybe you might want to consider it. Landfall decks might want to consider it, but there's better things out there. It is low to the ground, though. It is ironically, I mean, obviously it's Chocobo, so it's a bird. Doesn't fly, but it's a bird. There are very few birds out there in Magic that don't fly, but Chocobos would be one of them. Yeah. 0/1 bird. Cool. All right, there you go. So if you have landfall or counters and you really want this in the deck, consider it. If not, that's okay. Next up, Garland, Knight of Cornelia, a 3/2 human knight for 2 mana in Rakdos. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. So yeah, that's a good amount of card selection and graveyard filling. Then you can pay 7 mana in total. Return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield transformed. Activate only as a sorcery. Interesting. So this is one where you can transform it, but you have to do it out of your graveyard. So this could be good, first of all, before I flip it over and talk about the backside. This could be good, essentially, in, well, I mean, mill decks. Decks that have, like, discard outlets, essentially, for them, too. Or just, like, looting decks, rummaging decks, so you can get this in the graveyard if that's what you actually want to do. Or if it's a self-mill deck and you're like, okay, cool, yeah, I can get benefits off while this is in play. If you just want it straight in your graveyard, though, that's quite nice to do so. I mean, as a commander, it's like you can't really get it straight in your graveyard. You have to, like, play it and then sacrifice it, or, like, use a way to get to your hand, then discard it, but more so play and sacrifice is probably what you would do. A bit easier. Next up, though, it flips over into, once you get it back out of your graveyard, Chaos the Endless, a 5/5 demon with flying. When it dies, put on the bottom of its owner's library. I mean, it's a lot of work for this commander deck. It's not a lot of work, I would say. But, like, paying 7 mana to do so, like, yeah, for a 5/5 flyer, I mean, there are different kinds of strategies. That is one. That is one strategy. And you don't really want it on the bottom of your library if it's your commander, technically, usually. But I'm sure there's some weird combos you can work with it. I mean, technically, right, Grenzo, Dungeon Warden, could utilize it out of the bottom library, but then just get back and play regularly. I'm sure there's some weird combo you can do with it. Anyways, it's a cool design. Next up, Emet-Selch Unsundered, a 2/4 Elder Wizard for 3 mana in Dimir. Vigilance, when it enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. So loot at the beginning of your upkeep. If there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform it. Interesting. So double threshold, essentially, for that. When it comes to getting cards in your graveyard, yeah, I mean, you're in 2 colors that are great at it. A lot of great looting effects, a lot of great milling effects as well. Discarding effects too if you need them. That being said, the ETB helps, but you want other ways to get there, obviously. When you do, it flips over into a 6/6 Hades, Sorcerer of Eld, 6/6 Avatar with Vigilance. During your turn, you may play cards from your graveyard. That can be broken in so many ways. Oh my gosh. Yep. Yep. Okay, that's something. Okay, if a card or token put it in your graveyard from anywhere, exile instead. Okay, so there's how it kind of stops the the broken part. If that last part wasn't there, be like, oh, the game's just over because there's so many loops that you could do. this stopping things from actually getting back into your graveyard. This is kind of like what, like Yawgmoth's Bargain or something like that, whatever the one is that you can play things out of your graveyard. That's basically what it would be. But yeah, I mean, you can still do some absolutely crazy things. Again, like, you're incentivized to heavily mill yourself, get a lot of things in your graveyard. I mean, Morality Shift is like the best friend of this commander, which that's the card where you like, okay, like I take my library and I swap it with my graveyard, and now I've got a giant graveyard and a small library. And then you're like, okay, cool. I have this as my commander, it flips, and all of a sudden, cool, I can play my entire library basically because it's my graveyard. So yeah, there's already going to be like absolutely crazy combos that work with this one. It is a low to the ground commander, and again, it is only 3 mana. Wow, that's quite cool. It is an upkeep trigger, so do keep that in mind. That's probably the best way that they could have done this, so it's not just like out of nowhere, oh my goodness, bonkers crazy. You got to keep this commander around until your upkeep in order to get that. You might just kind of have, like, you know, some like miscellaneous mill effect in my hand, or like a frantic search so I can discard 2 cards like before my turn. Like, so my opponent's like, okay, they're only at 10. And then I'm like, okay, now I play these 2 cards and I mill myself 4 or whatever, and all of a sudden I'm at 14. Upkeep goes, yay! That's probably more so what you need to do. But yeah, it's an interesting commander for sure, and that backside is, my goodness, deadly, very cool. Oh my goodness gracious, that's a cool design. Next up, we have a summon, so we can see what actual summon is. It looks like kind of like a lore counter, or lore, essentially. Lore counter, saga, essentially, with like lore counters. A 4/5 saga elemental that costs 5 mana. As the saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter, sacrifice after 3. So it is basically a saga, there you go. Heavenly Strike, the first one is going to be tap target creature opponent controls, put a stun counter on it. That's the first and second lore counters. The third one is draw a card for each tab creature opponent's control. Yeah, so you do still have to sacrifice it. So again, kind of like summons in Final Fantasy, I guess. That makes sense. So you're just kind of like temporarily there. But yeah, a 4/5 for 5 mana that you actually get things off of it. It's interesting that you're like, it's very interesting kind of the direction they've gone with sagas and like how that's evolved into different kinds of cards. And now it's kind of not coming full circle, I wouldn't say, but like now it's like turning into a creature now too. Whereas it kind of like became like, started off as like, all right, it's like Planeswalker adjacent is what Saga was, like what Planeswalkers are supposed to be essentially initially. And now it's like, okay, coming back to like Sagas are also creatures now apparently. So it's interesting for sure. But yeah, I mean, you of course can have ways to manipulate the amount of counters on it, make it go quicker. But you also, with this, unlike regular Sagas, it's a lot easier to blink it and reset it because obviously there's a lot more blink effects out there that work on creatures. So I can see blink decks out there being like, yeah, I'll utilize that because essentially you're like, okay, cool. I get to keep utilizing that, you know, tap things down, stun things, and eventually I get that like big draw a bunch of cards effect, which can be quite nice. So yeah, like I could see blink effect decks being like, okay, let's keep in mind these different summons because they could definitely be really good. And there's definitely gonna be ones out there that are like really powerful, I am sure. This one's just an uncommon level. So yeah, I think there's probably gonna be some pretty hefty ones later on. Next up, though, we've got Sidequest, Catch a Fish. Interesting. Okay, this is a thing, apparently. Enchantment for 3 mana in white. If you keep looking at the top card of your library. If it's an artifact or creature card, you may reveal it and put in your hand. You put a card in your hand this way, create a food token, and transform this enchantment. Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, if you have an artifact or creature deck, you've got a pretty good chance of hitting one off the top. Even if you don't, you probably do, just in general. Unless you're, like, all Spellslinger. That being said, yeah, when you do so, you get a food token, you transform this, it flips over into Cooking Campsite. It's a land that can tap for a white mana, pay 3, tap, sacrifice an artifact, put a counter on each creature control, activate a sorcery. Interesting. So this is something where, again, this is technically ramp, right? Like, it's 3 mana. It is dependent on things being on top of your library, but it is technically ramp. It turns into a land. So, yeah, if you need a land that can get, you know, sacrificing artifacts to put counters on things, that's interesting. It's very interesting for sure. I mean, it'd be interesting to see kind of what other, like, side quest type cards we get and, like, flipping enchantments. Typically, you don't see, I mean, I can think of, like, you know, right now, but, like, enchantments that just, like, flip into that. So that's really, I mean, I can think of a couple now, I guess, But finally, we've got Sin, Spira's Punishment, 7/7 Leviathan Avatar with flying for 7 mana in Zultai. When it enters or attacks, exile a permanent card from your graveyard at random, then create a tap token that's a copy of that card. If the exile card is a land card, repeat this process. Okay, that's an interesting design space for sure. My goodness. Okay, first of all, my first thought off the top of my head right now is like, okay, Zurin Orb. And no other things in your graveyard. Okay, blink it. All right, sacrifice my entire land base. All right, Sin comes into play, gets all those lands back into play. Yep. I mean, as copies of them. But yeah, that's a way to essentially utilize landfall if you need it. I mean, I guess that could technically work against you if your opponent's like bounce your lands somehow, but typically people aren't bouncing lands. So yeah, there you go. If it's a land card, repeat the process. So yeah, being able to just get tap tokens of yours. It is tapped, so keep that in mind. But yeah, a giant, massive like landfall thing. You could do that, but more so it's probably just like, yeah, get a bunch of random value miscellaneously. The most value you can probably get are like high value creatures, I would say, because you can easily populate those. There's some good populate effects in, well, green especially. But yeah, being able to utilize populate effects with that too and be like, okay, cool, I've got a massive copy of, I don't even know, like Avenger of Zendikar. Cool. All right, awesome. I'll populate it again and again and again and again and again. Sweet. But yeah, I mean, if you could also utilize a strategy where I think there is actually, I believe it's in Sultai. I'm pretty sure it's exactly in Sultai, an enchantment where it's like you can exile miscellaneous cards, just whatever cards you want without paying anything, and you get like a, I can't remember what it does. I think you get like a single colorless mana to use on something, but basically by being able to curate your graveyard, you could ensure that you hit certain things. So again, if you have, say, Omniscience in your graveyard, like you entomb an Omniscience, and then you play this, or you just blink it or whatever, you're like, oh, okay, at random, there's only one thing in my graveyard. Cool, I get Omniscience, I win the game, basically. So you could, again, just do like, okay, random spin of the wheel, or you could, all right, you know what, I'm going to get a specific thing, or miscellaneous land. There's a lot of different directions you can take this. I mean, obviously the attack trigger is nice, and again, being a 7/7 flyer, you've got some double strike effects you can typically utilize, again, like with equipment or whatever, so you can like, okay, I get through, cool, I take you out with combat damage, great. But you could also just be like, yeah, I'm just going to use and abuse ETBs. You could have different creatures that maybe, you know, blink this essentially when they come into play or reanimate something else or whatnot. There's definitely a lot of potential for this commander. It's quite hefty. I mean, blink decks will probably just want to utilize this anyways. It is 7 mana is a good amount, but again, like, the potential of this is pretty crazy. It is random, so that is nice in kind of holding it back from being very, like, combo-y for the most part. But yeah, there's definitely some crazy things that you can do with it. Again, especially if you can curate your graveyard and get specific things out. Again, if you're just like, oh, okay, I've got all these great things in my graveyard, but also Omniscience is in there. Yeah, let me curate my graveyard, make sure I don't have anything else in there except for Omniscience, hit that, and I basically win the game. It's a crazy cool card. Yeah, I'd love to see some builds around it, and I can't wait to build it myself. And with that, this episode is coming to a close. Comment below with your thoughts on it. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.